So this is, I think a lot of you have heard about the Ryuk and Ryuk, tomato. The ransomware that's kind of a derivative of Hermes and all that good stuff. But anyway, there's enough information out there on Google, so I'm not going to get into technical details of Ryuk. But recently, we've seen evidence through incident response that my team and I has done on the Ryuk incidents that have affected OT. They've gotten into OT environments and of oil and gas companies. And that's kind of what this is about. To talk a little bit about what some of the specific TTPs, for those of you that are following on with the buzzword bingo, what some of the TTPs were specific to that, and kind of where some of the communication failures were, partly mine, sorry. But background was, so we've responded to, so far, 2 incidents for MTSA regulated facilities where Ryuk infected systems there. There were also, so we know of at least 3 others that were oil and gas facilities infected by Ryuk that did touch OT systems. One was actually public, you guys may have heard of it, so that was Pemex. And then there are 2 others that I can't mention that we know about that were also oil and gas MTSA regulated facilities where Ryuk touched OT systems or affected OT systems in some way. So interestingly enough is that these were all within about 2 months of each other, maybe sooner. I don't have to go back and ask my team, but in terms of how the incidents, where they started and where it unfolded, but they were all within about 2 months of each other. And they all had very similar in a lot of cases of those CTPs, but what is it, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Again, buzzword bingo, love it. All right, and so the Coast Guard recently issued an alert kind of regarding something alluding to this. And there were at least two, these are the ones that I found, at least 2 news reports that I guess elaborated on. I know I'm doing air quotes a lot, but there's a lot of quotes. But elaborated on the Coast Guard alert. And so I can't say for sure 100% that the Coast Guard was talking about the specific incidents that my team and I responded to, but it was close enough in the somewhat details they provided that my customers came to me and they were like, whoa, are they talking about us? Which kind of threw them off guard. It caught all of us off guard that we were on there. It was like, did they just do that? So luckily enough, some of the details weren't exactly right, or luckily enough for us that the details weren't right enough to actually expose the customers, but there were some things in these reports and in the news, the alert and the news reports that we wanted to actually kind of correct the story, because this is part of the information sharing process, to where if you're going to put out an alert and if it's going to be helpful, number one, you want to have your information right, your facts right, and you want to provide you want to provide enough information to where it's actually doing somebody some good, and information that's offered not quite right, and the story. Anyway, so first of all, in the reports, they said that Ryuk actually shut down, and in one instance, they said Ryuk shut down an ICS. Now, again, I can't vouch for the ones that he didn't respond to, and I don't know that the alerts weren't exactly talking about those, but in the ones we responded to, Ryuk didn't actually shut down any ICS. The operator actually ended up doing a manual failover, or they failed over into manual. And so, yes, Ryuk did affect SCADA systems, or it infected the Windows-based SCADA systems like HMIs and servers, engineering workstations, but the actual physical process was not directly affected by Ryuk. There was a manual failover. And so, They also said that, and it was in the reports, the media reports, and I think it was in the alert too, that physical access control systems and camera monitoring were affected by Ryuk as well. And they were, I don't remember if they said that, off the top of my head, if they were actually knocked out or if they were just affected. And technically, no, that's not true. In the incidents that we responded to, in at least one circumstance, we actually isolated the plant environment, and we cut the corporate network communication so that we put ourselves on an island. In doing so, that affected the communication of the physical access control systems and the camera monitoring. And so it wasn't Ryuk that did that. It was it affected indirectly, but it wasn't Ryuk that did that. And then they also said that, and the part, there was a bullet missing here, but they also said that industrial control systems were down for 30 hours. So in the cases that we investigated, yes, anywhere from 24 to up to 72 hours, in one case probably a little longer, yes. The SCADA and the DCS were affected, and network communication to corporate was down, but there were no control systems down, no physical process control systems down for 30 hours that we investigated. We were cut from the network. And so in the last part, the claim was that Ryuk disrupted business internet and network communications. Ryuk didn't do that, not the ones that we responded to. Ryuk didn't do that. That's kind of getting the story straight and clearing the air there and what happened. And so, again, the TTPs for Ryuk, again, this isn't a story about something that's new and great about new IOCs. Again, more buzzword bingo and TTPs. There were a few things that were done differently that we haven't seen before. But again, if you want more information on Ryuk, you can Google that. There's a lot of information, a lot of good reports on how Ryuk works. And so the short story is, it's not spray and pray. And so it's not ransomware that you put out there on a worm and hope it infects something. Ryuk requires a little more finesse. So it has to be given a transport mechanism, so somewhere to get into the system in this case, and in most cases that I've read about, it's TrickBot is the deployment mechanism. So they'll deploy TrickBot first through, in this case, both cases that we responded to, through ransomware, through spear phishing campaigns, and we believe there was also possibly one watering hole campaign that was the initial attack vector. They got in using TrickBot, and the reason I mention this, why it's so important to mention that TrickBot is not spray and pray, is because it has, and then these are reports, so you can go out there and read the reports on, I'm going to use CrowdStrike's terminology. I think CrowdStrike came up with big game hunting, right? And so any company out there that they think that they can get big money from, they're calling big game hunting, and it's a more targeted effort. When I say targeted, I don't mean I'm targeting you, specific company. If I'm a threat actor, I'm targeting you, a specific company, for a specific reason. It's more of targeting of an industry, it's a more hands-on approach to deploying the ransomware as opposed to attaching it to a worm and let it self-propagate. And so they initially gained entry using phishing emails, deploying TrickBot, and then they remained on this. This was what was interesting. They remained in the network for several months. Some of them going back to late 2018 and or going into like early 2019, January 2019, and they stayed in the network for quite some time. And then some evidence was discovered around last summer that they thought they saw something funny going on in the control systems. Can't verify that. That was just hearsay from the operators. And in hindsight, everything's a ghost, right? So they moved laterally through the network using RDP. So there's your common TTP IOCs there for Ryuk, which is using lateral movement, using RDP, unsecured RDP. That's my favorite red team trick too. So RDP, it's great for red teams and malware. So once they gained control of the Active Directory server, this is what was really interesting, because in the past, what we've seen is that they'll weaponize the Active Directory server using TrickBot, and they'll continue to propagate TrickBot through the network. In this case, they actually weaponize Active Directory with the Ryuk payload specifically. So they put the Ryuk payload directly into the roaming login script. So then at that point, anybody who logged in using that Active Directory server, it it would immediately detonate the payload, and you're immediately infected with Ryuk. So that was really interesting. We haven't seen that tactic before, and so it kind of had an exponential proliferation effect to where, you had terminal servers, and so they'd use the terminal server would get infected, and then you would have the remote users would immediately get infected, and then they actually, in both cases, they did have an Active Directory server set up for the enterprise network, as well as an Active Directory server set up for their DCS and SCADA, so kudos to them. Unfortunately, they talk to each other. So the first Active Directory server got infected, and then whenever the information either replicated or the first one logged in using the primary domain controller from the enterprise network, it got infected. And so that's, I hate to say it, but it was kind of an artful technique to weaponize Active Directory in that way. So not impressed, just surprised. The other thing that we thought was interesting was since they were in the network for this long and then waited for so long to then deploy the ransomware, and this is just theory, but it would be an interesting tactic by a threat actor to where if you were inside of the network and then you thought you were discovered, to deploy Ryuk as ransomware to make the operator think that it was a ransomware attack, thus causing them to hopefully restore from backup. And since they were in the network for so long, you would be restoring back to a compromised state. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. So the operator thought that they were going to restore from backup and clean it off that way, but they restored back to a compromised state. So again, can't prove that that's what was actually going on, because there were several oil and gas companies that were in this time frame, so that that would allude to the fact that this was an oil and gas industry targeted big game hunting campaign. But at the same time, you could also ascertain the possibility that it was a diversion tactic trying to get them to revert back to that compromised state, and then maintain persistence that way and then lay low for a while. And so everybody was asking me, so what are the IOCs for this? Well, I mean, there are no new IOCs except for looking for the actual Ryuk payload instead of the TrickBot payload in the roaming login profile. And so, or the script. Really, those IOCs are already out there. They're already published. It's all the Ryuk IOCs. It's the TrickBot IOCs. But in this case, now you want to specifically look for that Ryuk payload. And I mean, but if you're analyzing stuff, you're going to see something odd in the login script anyway. And so again, when I say targeting, I basically mean that it was targeted in the aspect of Ryuk as a targeted ransomware as opposed to spray and pray. All of the similar TTPs in the same timing within the same industry at the same time would suggest that at that time, actors were using Ryuk to target oil and gas. And my assumption, my opinion would be because that's where the money is. They're going to go after oil and gas companies, and so they're targeting there. But I tried to get some people in the intelligence community to verify that, and that's what Dale and I had a lot of conversation about this and tried to talk about, well, was this targeted? Is this a information sharing failure? And in this case, even the sources within the information community told me that there was no specific preference to the targeting, but of course, evidence would suggest that all these companies that were oil and gas companies got targeted. There was some sort of specific targeting going on. But I think that the information community, the intelligence community, since they have such a broad spectrum that they're looking at, they're seeing all these other things, and that would suggest that okay, maybe it wasn't specific, but in that case, I think it was. We are still developing, and we're still getting more information that's developing, and as time goes on, I'll let the community know if there's anything more specific to suggest any more TTPs or IOCs that need to be disseminated. But the last thing that I wanted to mention was the communication that I had with Dale, and that is this an information failure? And I'm reluctant to say that it was for several reasons. And that's because, we did speak to several industry peers. Oop, there's a big squeaky board. We did speak to several industry peers and in the oil and gas community. And unless you were directly involved with these incidents, nobody was hearing about it. And another question was posed, well, would it have made a difference? If you actually had the ability to get out communication immediately, would that have stopped any of these incidents? And would it have made a difference? And on one hand, I don't think it really would have, because there's already so much communication about Ryuk out there, and we already kind of have an elevated sense of urgency just based on the fact that there's this new ransomware, modified ransomware out there. However, I would have to think that, due to the kind of head in the sand complex we tend to have and the complacency, I think that if we would have got information out there that said, hey, look, we actually do have active campaigns targeting oil and gas right now, so be alert. And here's what maybe it would have lifted the veil a little bit from the complacency and got people to wake up a little bit, and maybe some of the ones that got affected wouldn't have. I don't know. But I'm not going to really call this a complete information failure, because you can't blame the ISECs if they're not getting the information. Oil and gas ISEC didn't hear about it. And if they're not getting the information, it's not their fault. Being out there on site. So when you talk about, well, why aren't the operators and the incident responders talking about this, communicating this? And a lot of that has to do with, the operators, my customers, they're clueless, and they're looking to me for guidance on, clueless about how to do this, how to respond, and don't even know they should. So they're looking to me, the responder, for guidance. So in big part, the responders are at fault in not doing this and not communicating. And, I think a lot of that has to do with, number one, you never know. Whenever you have regulated facilities you're talking about, you kind of don't know what you can say and when and where, and you're kind of waiting around. Everybody's looking at each other going, what do I say? When do I say it? And that's kind of an issue. And so that's one of the big deals and one of the big reasons why there wasn't a lot of communication going on. But I think, kind of in closing on that, there's two things. I think that even when you have that situation, I think getting the information out there and just start talking, at least at a low level and a vague level, as much as you can, to start getting it out there, I think that would help. May save some headaches and money, may not, I don't know. And I think that the Coast Guard, I think that's what they were attempting to do when they released that alert, but that alert was so vague and so void of information that I don't think that it, other than raising the awareness, I don't think that it really did much good to have people looking at the specificity of where the attack was, or any of the TTPs, anything that was new. But then again, like I said, there really wasn't anything new. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that, do we communicate? Do we not? Is there anything new? No. And so do you blame the Coast Guard for saying, well, you didn't really give us any information? Well, there was no information. So maybe that's what the Coast Guard is trying to do, and raise the awareness a little bit, like I just mentioned. So, not sure. And so, I don't actually have so I had 22 minutes here instead of the full 30. Got to give room for the awards. And I don't have a thank you slide because I'm a terrible ingrate. But so anyway, I should have at least had an apology slide. So one thing I want to leave out there is that I want to leave this out there. This is all still developing. We're still getting information. And I just wanted to leave you with the fact that, look, here's the kind of the corrected story from what's actually happening out there from the news reports. I wanted to kind of just at least bring some awareness out there that there are some targeted things going on. There are some new TTPs. And if anybody out there in the threat monitoring or the threat intelligence community, I've reached out to some of you. And if you want to, as this does develop and we communicate with the ICs that are involved, if you want to talk about this and get specific into the details, which I couldn't do here because just not enough time. And I think this is the main stage, so we don't get detailed, do we? But anyway, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you more about this and share some of the further details that I actually have on this, if it would help you. And if it won't help you, then I'm sorry. So anyway, all right, appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody. And have safe travels, and see you next year. Take care.